Chapter 1. How long it held me, and why the warnings bounce off. Before I signed up for my first Tony Robbins event, I searched. I want you to know that, because it is the whole reason this exists. I am not a man who jumps without looking. It is what I do. I investigated, I read, I went as deep as I know how to go, and what I found was a record that was thin and lopsided. Something like 95% of it was praise. The criticism that existed was always framed, never detailed, never taking the machine apart far enough to show you the gears. So even going deep, even doing the work I trust myself to do, I came up holding the same conclusion the system wanted me to hold. The depth of my research did not protect me. The record was too one-sided to let it. I went looking back then for exactly the thing you are reading now. It did not exist, so I wrote it. I had tried once before and failed, and the failure is worth telling because it shows you what does not work. I made a video. I called it a scam. I called it a cult. I told everyone I felt stupid for falling for it. And it helped no one, including me, because naming a thing is not the same as taking it apart. You can call something a cult and have it sound like a man who got burned and is bitter about it. That video went nowhere, and it deserved to. I could not have made it go deeper at the time, even if I had tried. So let me give you the dates, because the dates are part of the point. My first Tony Robbins event was in 2021. It took 3 years before I could say in public that it had been wrong. It took 2 more before I could explain why with any depth. 5 years, total, from the first event to a warning worth reading. That is why this is long. A warning the size of the one I eventually got will bounce off the next person exactly the way it bounced off me. You cannot reach someone this far in with a slogan or a link. The only thing that has a chance is the detail the existing criticism never had. And I need to be honest about how long it held me, because the usual story is wrong. People like to say the high wears off in a few days. Mine did not. There was no firewalk. I did the event online, and the equivalent was a piece of wood. You write your limiting beliefs on it, and then you smash through it with your hand, and that is supposed to be you destroying the beliefs. A breakthrough you can hold. But that was not where the high lived. It came from all of it at once. The dancing, the dreaming, the believing I had changed, and the believing I had helped change someone else. By the end of the 4 days, I was completely high, and it did not drain away in a few days the way people say it does. The belief that something underneath had changed held me for about 3 months. Nothing had actually changed. I could not have told you that at the time, because the feeling that it had was still running. I want to compare it to a cult, the way I did in that video, but this time carefully, because I cannot tell you what Tony Robbins runs. I can only tell you what it did to me, and what it did to me had the shape of one, the duration, the way I defended it, the proof I reached for when anyone pushed. I will let you decide what to call it. I am only telling you what it felt like from the inside, which is the one thing about this that nobody can argue with me about. There was one proof in particular that I leaned on, and I am going to set it aside here on purpose. It is a study with a Stanford name on it, and it says his seminar put 100% of depressed people into remission. That number did real damage to me, and I used it to wave away the one person who tried to warn me. But it has earned its own piece of work, and I do it properly in the third part, where I take the paper apart page by page and show you that you do not have to trust a word I say about it. Here it is enough to know what it was for. It was not there to be true. It was there to end the conversation. Chapter 2. The Machine. How the Want is Built. Before I show you the machine, I have to show you the dream it installs, because everything else is built to protect that dream. I remember him telling a story about himself, not the famous one, the broke kid sleeping in his car, a later one. In the way I remember it, he was already successful by then, doing well, but he had come to know people who were not just successful, they were wealthy, on a different scale entirely, and they kept pulling him into their world. Travel, extravagant trips, the kind those people took without thinking. And the point of the story, the way it landed on me, was that he could not really afford it. Even successful, even doing well, these trips were beyond him. And he went anyway. He overextended to stay in the room with them, and that, the story said, was the making of him. I want to be careful and tell you that this is my memory of what he said, not a transcript. But I am not careful about what the story was for, because that part I am sure of. It was an instruction. It was telling me what arrival looks like and how you get there. Here is the dream, stripped down. You are doing fine, but fine is not arrival. Arrival is being among the wealthy, the powerful, the people on the next tier up. And the way you get there is not by being sensible. It is by spending past what you can afford to stay in their proximity, because proximity is the thing. Discomfort is the price of admission, and paying it is the heroic act. He had a whole teaching around this, dressed in better language. Cross the threshold of your comfort zone. That is where greatness lives. It sounds like courage. Underneath, for a lot of people in that room, it is a permission slip to spend money they do not have. And I know it works, because it worked on me, and I was not a desperate man. I had a home. I had assets. I was not sleeping in a car. I was exactly the person this dream is built for, doing fine, and quietly certain that fine was not enough. So how do you put a dream that size into a person who walked in with a normal life? You do not argue them into it. You install it. And there is a method, and I sat through it. It begins with wanting money, not money for anything in particular. That is the part people miss. He does not need you to want a specific thing. He needs you to want a big number, and he does not much care what you hang it on. An island, a plane. Buy an island, buy a plane, it does not matter. What matters is the size. He walks you through imagining it, eyes closed, in the state I will come back to and name properly in a moment, and the number does not sit still, it climbs. Whatever you picture, he pushes it bigger. The exercise is not really about the island. It is about training the want itself to grow, so that whatever you came in willing to settle for, you leave unwilling to settle for. Then comes the move that does the real work, and I need you to watch it closely, because it is the most careful thing he does. He turns the money toward the people you love. Wouldn't you want them never to have to work again? Wouldn't you want to provide for them the way only the wealthy can provide? And just like that, the wanting is no longer about you. It is about them. A selfish hunger has been turned into a duty. Now, if you do not want the money badly enough, you are not being sensible. You are failing your family. He has taken the most decent thing in you, your love for the people who depend on you, and wired it to the cash register. And then, while that is still working in you, he turns the same lever the other way, because wanting is only half of it. The other half is fear, and fear is the stronger pull. So he walks you down the worst road your life could take. He does not let you keep it vague. He insists on it. Go extreme, he says. Really go there. Do this properly, because the ones who go all the way down are the ones who change. What happens if you stay exactly as you are now? Where does this version of you end up? And he guides you into it with your eyes closed, in the same voice he used for the island and the plane. I am going to call what he does hypnosis, and keep calling it that, because that is what it was from where I sat, inside it. You can call it guided visualization if you prefer the gentler word. I know what it felt like to be the one in the chair, and it was hypnosis. Except now it is not a dream he is building. It is a nightmare, and it is yours, made as vivid and as specific as he can make it. I know exactly where that road went for me, because I have a real one. For years I was a functional alcoholic, functional right up until I was not. That is its own story, and I have told it elsewhere. But it means that when he told the room to... Chapter 3. The machine, the state they put you in. Now you have a want, scaled up, moralized and declared out loud to a room. The next job is to get you into a state where you will act on it. A rested person, at home, with a clear head and a calendar, weighs a $10,000 decision, and usually says, "Let me think about it." So the design makes sure you are never that person. The first tool is time, and I can only tell you how it worked on me. It is a worldwide event, run on his clock, Eastern Time, because that is where he was. I was watching from Chile, 2 hours ahead, so my day started at 10 in the morning and ended at 3 the next morning. Then it began again, and I had it easy. The people watching from London were 3 hours past me, the people in Germany 4. A 3 a.m. finish for me was 6 or 7 in the morning for them. They were being kept awake until sunrise and asked to come back and do it again. This was not a scheduling accident of a global audience. It was a single clock, his clock, laid over the whole planet, so that almost everyone not sitting in his time zone was steadily stripped of sleep. And the whole time, the encouragement never stops. Do not skip anything. Do everything. Stay for all of it, because the most important material comes at the end. Which means the people who are most depleted, the ones a sane voice would send to bed, are precisely the ones being told the reward is in not stopping. The second tool is worse because it is quieter. As an attendee, you feel it only as a fog you cannot get out of. There is no schedule. Breaks do not come at set times. They arrive when the program wants them, often long, often empty, dead stretches built around the upselling rather than around your need to eat or rest. You ask, "Please, when is lunch?" and the answer is always the same shrug. Soon. Maybe. We will see. So you cannot plan a meal, you cannot plan a phone call, you cannot tell yourself you will hold on until 1 o'clock and then step out, eat, and think the decision through with a clear head, because there is no 1 o'clock you can count on. You stop trying to manage yourself because there is nothing to manage against. It would be easy to think that is just how a big live event runs, loose, improvised, a man following his instinct on stage. I thought that too, until I was crew. Then I learned the thing that changed how I see all of it. We did not know the schedule either. The people running the room, trained on the headsets, making it happen, were kept in the same dark as the audience. When we asked, the answer was that Tony does not do schedules. It is Tony. We do not know. Think about what that means. An operation this size, with crew and timed sessions and sales windows that have to land at particular moments, has a schedule. It cannot run without one. Someone at the top is holding it. But the not knowing is pushed down onto everyone else, staff included, which tells you it is not spontaneity, and it is not a free spirit reading the room. The uncertainty is the product. It is manufactured, maintained, and handed to everyone in the building who is not at the very top. Put the two together and look at the person it makes. You are exhausted, on a clock that was never yours. You cannot predict when relief will come, so you stop trying to manage yourself and simply endure. You cannot leave, because the moment you step out might be the moment something happens. You cannot think ahead, because there is no ahead you are allowed to see. All you can do is stay and feel and wait for the thing that is always coming at the end. That is the state. A sober man says, "Let me think about it." They have made very sure that by the time the close arrives, there is no sober man left in the room. And here is the thing I struggled longest to say, because it is the part that felt most wrong and took me years to name. None of this would be allowed if he were what he appears to be. The trust starts before the event does. They ask you things up front, your fears, your history, the places where your life has gone wrong. You hand it over, willingly, in detail, because everything about how he is presented tells you that you are giving it to a healer. And you give a healer your wounds for one reason, because a healer is bound to hold them safely. That is the whole contract. You open yourself to someone you believe is constrained by a duty of care, someone who is not allowed to use what you just gave them against you. Now hold that next to what you have just seen them do. They take you, already exhausted on a clock that was never yours, already kept in the dark, and they put you into what I can only call hypnosis. They walk you into your dream, and then into your worst fear, the specific one. Chapter 4. One message from the stage, another at his own door. I've been telling you what the machine did inside the room. I want to step outside it for a moment, because there is one thing that happened in public that did as much to break the spell as anything that happened to me privately. It is the clearest look I have at the gap between what he says and what he does, and once I saw that gap, I could not unsee it. This was COVID. I was deep in it at the time, following virologists, following the actual experts, trying to understand the thing properly. And in September 2021, Tony Robbins walked onto a stage in Orlando, not even his own event, a sales conference called Funnel Hacking Live, run by someone else, and used his time there to make light of the pandemic and cast doubt on the vaccines to a crowd that was happy to cheer it. He joked that Australia's nighttime curfew made no sense because the virus only comes out at night. He told the room that far more Americans die every day from driving than from COVID, so being afraid of your neighbour was foolish. The comparison was not close to true. At that moment, COVID was killing many times more Americans a day than car crashes were, and he was in Florida, a state then among the hardest hit in the country. He was not off by a little on the exact comparison he used to wave the whole thing away. Here is what I could not reconcile, and now I can prove it, because I kept the emails. The one below is dated the 24th of November 2021, 2 months after he stood on that stage in Orlando. Those same Fiji events I had paid for required every single attendee to be fully vaccinated. This is not my memory. It is in writing from his own organisation in the email confirming my room. Everyone travelling must be fully vaccinated. A PCR test within 72 hours of the flight. On arrival, transport by a COVID-certified car to a COVID-certified hotel, and 48 hours on the property before a test would let you move. Which means he was vaccinated too, because there was no other way into his own room. So the message going out from that borrowed stage and the rule governing his own events did not match. One thing said to a cheering crowd, the opposite thing required to stand in front of him in Fiji. I am not going to argue the science with you here. That was never my point. My point is only the gap. He told the room one thing and enforced another at his own door. The same gap shows up in his teaching on money, and here I happen to have the background to see it. I have invested on my own for years, and I come out of the school that says you buy the index and you wait. Tony Robbins wrote a finance book, Money, Master the Game. In it, he advocates exactly that. Diversify, buy low-cost index funds, do not try to beat the market. He built the book on interviews with John Bogle and Warren Buffett. And then Wealth Mastery gets into Bitcoin, sold to a crowd getting excited about Bitcoin. The man who put Bogle's index fund gospel in print was, on this stage, pointing people at the Vegas table. I did not have to form an opinion about that. I just had to set his book next to his seminar. That is the whole tell, sitting in plain sight. The marketing converted me everywhere I was a novice. It failed everywhere I was an expert. The machine was never running on truth. It was running on the gap between what I knew and what I could check, which means it works on nearly every person it meets, because every person is an expert in something and a beginner in almost everything else. It just needs the subjects you cannot audit, and there are always more of those. Chapter 5. What it does to people. Up to here, this has been about what the machine did to me. Now I have to tell you what it does to other people, and to do that honestly, I have to tell you where I was standing when I saw it. There is a sentence that every one of these stories runs into, and I want to put it down before I tell you the stories, because otherwise it will be waiting at the end to explain them all away. It worked for the people it worked for. You will hear that. You will hear it from people who took massive action, and built something real, and they are not lying. It did work for them. The trouble is what that sentence is used to prove. If it worked for them and not for you, the system has one answer ready and only one. You did not do the work. You did not go all in. The method is sound, so the failure has to be yours. Watch what that does. It makes the thing impossible to fail. If you succeed, the method gets the credit. If you do not, you get the blame. There is no result that lands on the room. A system where every outcome confirms the system is not a system you can test. It is a belief with the exits welded shut. And the word holding it all up is work. It sounds like fairness. It sounds like accountability, the most reasonable word in the building. It quietly assumes that effort was the only thing that ever varied between the person on the stage and the person who went home broke. It was not. The people it worked for are kept where you can see them, on the stage, in the testimonials, at the front of the room. The people it did not are gone. They left quietly, most of them sure it was their own fault, because the frame told them so on the way out. You are shown every winner and almost none of the losers, and then asked to judge whether the thing works. That is not evidence. That is a room built to display its survivors and file its casualties under self-sabotage. I can show you the casualties because I stood next to two of them, and neither of them was lazy. One had given the system years of her money and years of her labor and stood as close to the man himself as anyone gets. The other paid for the highest tier there is out of her own retirement. By the only measure the room permits, do the work, go all in, commit everything. They did more than I ever did, and more than most of the people cheering. Here is where the work took them. I did not only attend. I went back and worked one of the events from the inside. I crewed a business mastery. I want to be precise about why, because the flattering version is a lie. I did not go in as some sharp operator running a sting, never fooled, gathering evidence. I went back because I still thought the failure was mine. I had done business mastery once as a paying participant, and come out the other side, certain I was simply too stupid to get it, that everyone else had received the thing and I had missed it. So I wanted to go through it again. What I was no longer willing to do was pay anything more. And the system has a door built exactly for that. Once you have paid to attend an event a single time, you are allowed to crew that same event afterward, as often as you like, for free. So I crewed, my labor in place of a second fee. It let me back into the room without giving them another $1, which suited a man whose wallet had closed, but whose wound had not. It is worth saying plainly what that arrangement means, though, because it is not a favor. The people running these rooms are, in large part, former customers now working for nothing. The crew is the converted, paying the company back in hours instead of money. They took me. They wanted me, in fact, for a specific reason. I am a native German speaker, and they needed crew for the German language part of business mastery. So I had a real job. I was trained. I was put on their slack, shown how things ran, given a function and a place in the operation. This is not VIP seating. Crewing is work, and for those days I was staff. That is the whole reason the rest of this is worth reading. Attending an event makes you a customer, and a customer only ever sees the front of the thing, the stage, the lights, the story arriving right on time. Crewing puts you behind it. You see the machine from the side the audience never sees, while you are helping to run it. I was not immune back there. I want to be clear about that too. I got more depressed inside it, not less. The clarity I am offering you now did not arrive while I was on the crew, headset on, watching the room through a screen. It arrived years later, slowly, as the details came back, but I was there. I saw it from the inside. The promise is always abundance. Commit, give everything, stay close to it, and the abundance comes. I came too. Know a woman who had been part of it for years, not a newcomer. She had done the whole thing, every way there is to do it. She had paid her own way through the seminars, the customer's full journey, and she had crewed, online and in person, given years of her labor to making the events run. Both things the system asks of you, the money and the work. She had handed over both for years. And there was more, which is the part I keep coming back to. The whole dream he sells is proximity. Get near the wealthy, near the powerful, near greatness, and you rise. She had that. She told us she had spoken with Tony himself, that over her years inside she had been one of the people near him, close to the source as anyone gets. I am not saying she still had that access the day I met her, and I am telling you this as she told it to us, not as something I can prove. But think about what it means even so. I am not going to pretend proximity to successful people is worthless. It can inspire you. It can open a door. What it is not is the sure thing it is sold as. And the proof was sitting in the same Zoom room as me, a woman who had been beside the man himself, who taught that being beside such men is how you make it. She mentioned without drama that she was homeless, that she was living in her car. I have turned that over many times since. Here was someone who had done everything the system tells you to do, and not halfway. She had bought what it sold, worked inside it for years, and stood as close to the source as a person can stand. And the abundance that is promised to every face in the audience had not reached the one person who had given it the most and been nearest to its center. I did not say anything to her. There was nothing to say that would not have been cruel. I just carried the question out with me, and I am still carrying it. If it works, why not for her? And then there is the other one, the woman I met at Date with Destiny, because the top of the ladder is sold hardest there. The top tier is called Platinum. It is the inner circle, the tier where you travel the world to his events and stand closest to him. I have never seen the price on paper. What gets said, quietly, is that it costs somewhere in the high tens of thousands of dollars. That is the membership. It does not include the flights. It does not include the hotels. And the whole value of it is in going, event after event, to wherever they are held. Places like Fiji. She was a trainer, which means someone above you, someone you are meant to want to become. And she told the room, plainly, in an even voice with no shame in it, that she had paid for her platinum out of her pension, her retirement, and the room cheered. They cheered her warmly, the way you cheer someone brave. Then someone asked her how it had been, and she said in the same even voice that she had not really been able to make the most of it. She had got to one of the events, perhaps two, but to get the value you have to attend them all, and attending them all means the travel, and after the pension went into the membership, there was not enough left for the travel, so she had bought the highest tier there is and then could not afford to use it. She was not bitter when she said this. She did not blame Tony, or the system, or anyone. There was no anger in it at all. If anything, she was proud, and that is why she was telling us. She had platinum. She wanted us to know. I did not say anything. Nobody in that room heard what I heard. They had cheered a woman for spending her retirement on a membership she was then too poor to use, and she had thanked them for it. Chapter 6. The Access Trap. Who it is really built for. I have told you the dream is proximity. Now I want to show you what proximity actually costs, and who can afford to pay it, because the price is the part that gives the whole thing away. And I can show it to you through my own booking, the one that nearly took me and then, by accident, saved me. One of the things my $10,000 covered was Life and Wealth Mastery, sold under one name but really two programs run back-to-back on a Fiji island. The content was free to me. It was already inside what I had paid. I could have done the whole thing virtually from my own house for nothing more. Same teaching, same speakers, same material. I chose to fly to a Fiji island for it instead. Not for the content, for the room. Proximity was the thing, and a screen could not give me that. I need you to understand how far in I still was when I made that choice. By then I had no income. None. And I gave them my credit card anyway. I booked the room in Fiji, the cheapest one, the single, the one I could just about tell myself I could carry. A man with no income, putting a card down on a room in Fiji. That is not a man being careless with money. That is a man who has been taught that the spending is the cure. Because that is the doctrine. You go out beyond your means and it comes back to you. Commitment makes the abundance arrive. Holding back is the scarcity thinking that keeps you poor. So the emptier my account got, the more the teaching told me to spend, and I did. That is the part people miss about how this works. It does not only take from people who have it pushes hardest on the ones who have nothing left, and it calls that pushing empowerment. And I was not doing this blind. I had already come out of Date with Destiny more depressed than I went in. I had already watched the trainer be cheered for paying for platinum out of her pension, a woman who then could not afford to use the thing she had emptied her retirement to buy. I had seen the cost laid out in front of me in another person's life, plainly, and I had felt the verdict in my own body, the depression that kept arriving where the lift used to be. Every signal a person could ask for was present and visible, and I still gave them the card. Here is what I did with her warning, because it is the whole thing in miniature. I budgeted for it. I told myself I would not be her. The warning did not stop me. It gave me a spending limit. I heard what this had done to her retirement and walked away with a plan to do it more carefully. That is how far gone the want was by then. It could take the clearest warning in the room and turn it into a smarter way to say yes. There was friction too. The money was not easy to reach. It would have meant selling assets that were not only mine, jointly held with my wife, and my wife was growing concerned. But friction alone would not have saved me. If the want had been at full strength, I would have found a way, the way I watched other people find a way. I saw people max out credit cards in that world, reaching for money they did not have, on the promise that commitment makes the abundance come. Want at full strength always finds a way. So when I tell you I did not leave because I saw through it, I mean it exactly. I had seen through it. Seeing was never the thing that was missing. What had drained away, slowly, underneath everything I could say out loud, was the want itself. Every event had left me more depressed than the last. The conscious story held, the body kept the score, and by the time the big decisions came, the lift that used to override everything was gone. I did not save myself. They saved me by being greedy. The cheap room I had booked sold out, and the email that came back did not ask me a question. It informed me. She had placed me in a lodge room at $419 a night, sold out of everything else, please confirm. You are not asked whether you want the more expensive thing. You have already been put in it by someone whose job is to put you in it, and declining is now the work. Saying no is the thing you have to summon effort to do, against a default that someone built to assume your yes. And for once, with no income and the high already thinning, $419 a night was the reach too far. I declined it. That small no was the first real no I had managed in 2 years. And only then did they offer to move me to a later date, some room that might open up in a season that kept receding into the next year. And in the waiting, with nothing left to confirm and no high arriving to make me chase it, the last of the hope finally died. If they had simply confirmed my cheap room, I believe I would have gone. What stopped me was that they could not help reaching for more. And the reach is the thing that finally met the part of me that had nothing left to give. Now look at what that whole episode tells you about who the event is built for. The room they tried to place me in was $419 a night, and that was the small number. The real cost was getting a body from Santiago to a remote island in the South Pacific. The flights, the days, the whole apparatus of arriving. That is a wealthy person's travel budget. The kind of trip where $400 a night reads as only. The room was never big. A maximum capacity of 55 people per event. 55 bodies flown to a remote island in the South Pacific. The people for whom Fiji is an easy yes are the people who did not need wealth mastery in the first place. Everyone else has to do what I did. Reach for money they do not have to by proximity to people who already have it. That is not a flaw in how the event is run. That is the design. so I do not get to tell this as the story of a man who saw through it and got out. I did not see through it in time to matter. A room was sold out. That is the whole reason I am not still inside. Not that I was too clever for this, that I was lucky and she was not, and the difference between us was a booking. Chapter 7. The Funnel, the Friend, and the Method. There is one more thing, and it is the one I find hardest to write, so I'm going to write it plainly and not hide. They do not want your unused tickets to simply expire. An expired ticket is a dead end. Nobody new walks through it. What they want is for you to give it away, because a gifted ticket is a fresh body delivered into the room by someone who is trusted. The funnel is always hungry. It needs more people, and then more, and the cheapest way to find them is to turn the members it already has into recruiters without ever calling it that. So I gave one of mine away, to a friend, someone who already knew Tony Robbins, who had been around it, who had not been upsold into the deep end, and who was, despite all of that, still a fan. I want you to notice what that means, because it took me a long time to. I did not even hand the machine a naive stranger. I handed it someone who had already seen it and survived it with his affection intact, which is, in some ways, the better lead. The funnel does not only eat the innocent, it recycles the warm. I have told myself I sent him because I still half believed there was something in there worth having. That is not true, and the whole point of this is to stop telling myself things that are not true. By then, it was not for me anymore. I knew it. Every event had left me more depressed than the last, and somewhere under the story I was still telling out loud that had already hardened into a fact. So the ticket was not a thing I valued and wanted to share. It was a thing I was done with. He was a fan of Tony, and I had a Tony-shaped thing to give, and giving it felt good. That is the honest shape of it. The good feeling was mine. He was the occasion for it. I was not being generous to him. I was being generous to myself with his afternoon. And then there is the warning, which I used to think was the part that redeemed me. I did tell him not to let himself get upsold. I have wanted that on the record for a long time, as the thing that makes it okay. It does not make it okay. Listen to what that warning actually was. It is the same thing the whole internet says when you complain about Tony Robbins. Sure, the events are a trap, the upselling is ugly, but the content is good. Read the books, listen to the podcasts. It is worth it if you are careful. That is not a warning. That is the permission slip everyone uses to keep the thing acceptable. And I handed it to a friend while already knowing from the inside that there is no careful version. So my warning did not protect him. It did the opposite. It told him the core was safe, which is the one thing I no longer believed. I do not know what happened to him. I do not know if he got pulled in further, or spent money, or walked away clean. That not knowing is its own weight, and I have carried it the whole time I have been writing this. Look again at the sentence I handed him, because it is not just mine. It is the one that lets almost everyone forgive this whole thing. You hear it in nearly every criticism of Tony Robbins. Fine, people say, the events are too expensive, the upselling is ugly, but the method works. Look at the books. The events are the excess, the method is the gold. That sentence is the engine of the entire funnel, because as long as the method is gold, every ugly thing around it is forgivable, and a man who is done with the whole thing can still hand a friend a ticket and call it a favour. So look at the method. He does not really hide where it comes from. His core system is adapted from neuro-linguistic programming, which his own organisation says plainly. NLP was built in the 1970s by two other men, and they built it by copying still earlier therapists. The hypnotic feel of those visualizations traces back to a hypnotherapist who died decades ago. His philosophy came from a mentor he first met while working as a seller of seminar seats. The signature techniques existed before him and exist all around him, in cheaper rooms, in ordinary books, in the public domain of every idea he assembled. He is a gifted packager of other people's work. That is a real skill. It is not a secret, and it is not gold, and it is certainly not worth a pension. Take away the idea that the method works, and there is nothing left holding up the forgiveness. The events were never the regrettable excess on top of something precious. The events are the product. The method is the cover story that lets good people excuse them and hand the tickets to their friends. I know, because I am one of the good people who did it. Ending. People will wonder why I gave this so much time. Why a man would spend years on a thing he could have just walked away from and then write it out at a length almost nobody writes anything anymore. Part of the answer is that there was no single moment to walk away from. I did not wake up. It was a slow decline. I stopped believing the content long before I stopped going, until the only reason left to attend anything was to be near the wealthy, and then even that gave out, because every event left me emptier than the one before. In the end, I did not even want UPW, the one that had given me the high in the first place. When you stop reaching for the high, you are out, not because you got wise, because there was nothing left in it for the thing it had been feeding. And part of the answer is simpler. This meant the world to me to finish. I have carried it for years, in pieces, never able to hold all of it at once, and getting it finally out, in order, complete, is something I did not know if I could do. I will be honest about what finishing it felt like though, because the whole piece has been honest, and I am not going to break that at the end. It did not feel like relief. In the first moment, it felt like emptiness, complete emptiness. I had expected something lighter, and what arrived was a kind of hollow. I have come to understand that this is part of healing, and not the opposite of it. The emptiness is not the failure of the work. It is the shape the work leaves behind. But the real reason this exists is not about me at all. I told you at the start that I went looking for this and could not find it. That is still the truest thing I can say about why it is here. I could not warn the man I was. He had already done his research, and his research had failed him, and a slogan would have bounced off him the way every warning did. So I wrote the long version, the one with the gears showing, the one I needed and could not find. If you are searching now the way I searched then, looking into this because something in you is not sure, then you have found the thing I could not. That is what it is for. That is the only reason it is this long. I could not warn the man I was. This is the next best thing.